Move to coach. You people never learn. The words hit like turbulence before takeoff. A glass of orange juice arced through the cabin light, bursting across the front of her purple blouse. Every drop glowed against her skin like a warning flare. Passengers gasped. A camera phone rose. The flight attendant stood rigid in navy blue, eyes sharp with something colder than protocol. But before you judge what happens next, ask yourself this. What would you do if someone humiliated your wife in front of a plane full of strangers, not knowing she was married to the man who owns the skies? Stay with this story, because in minutes, power and prejudice will collide at 30,000 feet. It was Flight 822 from New York to Los Angeles. Midday. Calm air outside, chaos brewing inside. The hum of the engines mixed with whispers that grew like static. Row 2, Seat A. Amara Blake sat still, her chest rising slow, deliberate. She was 43, composed, dressed in simplicity that wealth often wears when it stops needing to prove itself. A clean blouse, a wedding ring, no logo, no shield. The attendant Karen Holt wasn't new. 12 years in the air had taught her to spot trouble, but trouble was often a mirror. When she saw Amara, she didn't see a first-class passenger. She saw intrusion, and she made sure everyone else saw it too. You must have switched tickets, Karen hissed. That seat isn't for mistakes. The words turned the cabin into a stage. A man across the aisle muttered, "Unbelievable." Another whispered, "This is gonna go viral." But Amara didn't move. Her fingers rested on the armrest like roots in soil. She spoke once, low and even. "Check my husband's name." Karen laughed, sharp and cruel. "Honey, your husband's name won't save you from policy." Then came the sound, the splash, the gasp, the metallic rattle of the glass hitting the floor, orange streaks down Amara's blouse, droplets clinging to the armrest, the scent of citrus slicing through recycled air. For a second, the cabin froze. Even the engine noise felt distant. A young flight attendant near the galley took half a step forward, eyes wide, then stopped when Karen shot her a look. Amara lifted her gaze, calm, heavy, the kind of calm that hides a storm. Somewhere over Pennsylvania, justice had just boarded this flight. The cabin smelled of citrus and fear. No one moved at first. A few passengers stared at the orange streaks running down the woman's blouse. Others looked away, pretending not to see what they had just witnessed. But there was no way to ignore it. The sound of the juice hitting the floor had already split the flight in two, those who felt disgusted and those who wanted to believe it was a mistake. Karen Holt, the flight attendant, adjusted her red scarf like nothing had happened. Her voice snapped through the cabin, steady and superior. "Clean up in first class," she said to the younger attendant near the galley, "and get her a towel so she can move to coach where she belongs." The younger woman hesitated. Her badge read Maya Lynn. She was 24, new to the crew, eyes still bright with the kind of hope the job was supposed to have. But right now, she looked at the scene and froze. "She is assigned to seat 2A, Maya whispered. Karen turned sharply. "And I am assigned to maintain order. Do you see order right now?" A few rows back, a man in a gray suit reached for his phone. Another whispered, "Did she just pour that on purpose?" Karen's jaw tightened. "Phones down, everyone. No recording allowed during service issues." Amara Blake sat perfectly still. Her hand brushed her sleeve, but she did not wipe away the juice. The liquid clung like proof, bright and undeniable. Her gaze was calm, unflinching, but her silence carried weight. When she finally spoke, her tone was soft enough that people had to lean in to hear. "You will regret this." Karen let out a laugh that cut through the cabin like ice. "Is that a threat?" "It is a promise," Amara said. Her voice did not rise, yet something in the air changed. The pilot's announcement faded over the intercom, half-sentence lost under the static. Even the hum of the engines seemed to soften, as if the plane itself were listening. Maya finally stepped forward with a towel, but her hands trembled. "Ma'am, please, let me help." Amara looked up at her and nodded once, not in gratitude but acknowledgement. "Thank you, Maya. That will be all." Karen's eyes narrowed. "How do you know her name?" Amara's reply was simple. "I read people faster than you do names." The older flight attendant's face flushed. She reached for the passenger manifest on her tablet and tapped Amara's row. "According to this, you purchased a first-class upgrade with points. Those cannot be verified until after boarding. Until then, you do not belong here." That last sentence cracked the quiet. A murmur spread through the cabin like ripples. Someone said, "That cannot be right." Another muttered, "She is humiliating her." Amara turned her head slightly toward the window. Below, the clouds stretched endless and white. In that endless space, she remembered another flight, 15 years earlier, an economy ticket, a red-eye from Atlanta to Dallas. She had asked for water and was told to wait because real customers come first. That moment had not broken her. It had built her. It had written a promise into her bones. Never again. Back in the present, Karen crossed her arms. "Are you going to move or not?" Amara looked at her and spoke in a tone that carried through every row. "I paid for this seat in full. You poured a drink on me, and you will apologize before I move anywhere." A hush fell. The couple across the aisle exchanged glances, unsure which side of history they were sitting on. Maya's voice wavered. "Karen, maybe we should just check again." Karen turned on her. "You want to keep your job, you follow my lead." That was when the intercom dinged. A voice came from the cockpit, formal and tight. "This is your captain speaking. Cabin crew, please report any issues to the front." Karen pressed the button on her earpiece. "Just a seating discrepancy, Captain. Handling it." She turned back to Amara. "If you do not move, I will have security meet us in Los Angeles." Amara's eyes did not blink. "Then you had better hurry. I would not want you to lose your career before landing." Karen sneered. "You really think you can talk like that and get away with it?" Amara's lips curved into a calm, dangerous smile. "I am not trying to get away with anything. I am already above you." Gasps spread through the cabin again. Someone whispered, "She is fearless." Another murmured, "She sounds like she means it." Karen snapped, "Enough." She reached for the call button to summon another attendant, but before she could press it, a sound cut through the cabin, a single, sharp notification tone. It came from Amara's phone, lying untouched on the tray table. The screen lit up with one line of text. "Protocol 7, initiated." Karen frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" Amara picked up the phone, her voice steady. "It means you just became the headline of the week." In row 4, a teenage boy whispered to his mother, "Mom, she is not joking, is she?" His mother shook her head slowly. "No, honey. I think we are about to see something real." Outside, the clouds broke open, sunlight flooding the cabin. Inside, the balance of power began to shift, one quiet breath at a time. The sunlight glared off the cabin windows, sharp and white, slicing through the silence that followed. For a few seconds, it seemed as if the air itself had stopped moving. Then came the whispers, thin at first, growing like static through the aisles. "What does she mean, Protocol 7? Someone murmured. Another voice, deeper, anxious. That sounded official. Karen Holt straightened her uniform jacket, trying to recover control of the space. "Everyone stay calm," she announced, though her own voice quivered. "We are experiencing a customer misunderstanding. Everything is under control." But nothing was under control. Maya Lynn, still holding the damp towel, looked at Amara Blake as if seeing her for the first time. The woman in seat 2A was no longer just a passenger covered in juice. There was something in her stillness, a sense that she had handled storms before real storms, the kind that could destroy lives or build empires. Amara set her phone gently on the tray table again. Face down, screen dark. The simple motion carried weight. It felt like a closing statement. "Miss Blake," Karen said, emphasizing the name as if trying to reduce it. "If you are attempting to intimidate me with some app notification, I suggest you stop now before this goes any further." "Oh." Amara did not respond. Her silence was sharper than any insult. Then, from the rear of the first-class cabin, a man in his 50s cleared his throat. He wore a dark suit and carried himself with the quiet authority of someone used to boardrooms and negotiations. "I am an attorney," he said carefully. "If this passenger wants to file a complaint, she has every right to do so without being removed from her seat." Karen's jaw tensed. "Sir, this does not concern you." It concerns everyone who paid to be here," he replied evenly, "especially when the service crosses into humiliation." A few passengers nodded. Someone muttered, "He is right." Karen exhaled hard, turning to Maya. "Get security on standby for landing." Maya's voice was small. "We have not done anything illegal." Karen snapped, "I said standby." Amara finally turned her head, her eyes meeting Maya's. "Do not be afraid of doing what is right." The words landed quietly but carried across the cabin like a verdict. Karen stepped closer to Amara's seat, her shadow falling across the tray table. "You are not in charge here." Amara's gaze lifted slowly, unbothered. "Neither are you. Not anymore." The older attendant leaned down, her tone venomous. "You think waving your phone makes you powerful? You think people like you can just—" Amara interrupted softly. "People like me built what you fly on." Karen blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said, people like me built this. The technology, the routes, the investments. You just serve the drinks." The words cracked the air. No one spoke. Even the attorney sat back, eyes wide. Then the phone on the tray table vibrated once. A voice came through the small speaker, firm and clear. "Mrs. Blake, confirmation received. Protocol 7 is in progress. The executive board has been notified. Estimated contact window, 8 minutes. Karen froze. "Who is that? Is this a prank?" Amara did not answer. She picked up her napkin, dabbed at the orange stain, and spoke as if to herself. 8 minutes is not long to rethink a career." From the back of the cabin, a whisper spread like wildfire. "She is connected to someone big. Maybe her husband is rich. Maybe she owns the airline." Maya glanced at her senior attendant, eyes wide. "Karen, maybe we should—" Karen slammed the service card into place. "Do not start. I am following procedure." But procedure could not erase what everyone had seen. The orange juice, the insult, the arrogance, the young trainee in the jump seat, a dark-skinned man named Daniel Cruz, finally stood. "Ma'am," he said carefully to Karen, "the passenger has not done anything disruptive. We could be in violation of FAA bias policies if—" Karen cut him off. "Sit down, Daniel. You are not certified to lecture me." Amara looked up at him. "Thank you for speaking." "One is a—" Daniel gave a tiny nod before sitting again, tension flickering across his face. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the aircraft crossed into another time zone. Outside, the clouds shifted from white to gray. Inside, the tension felt heavier, pressing down like altitude. Amara leaned back in her seat, her fingers folded neatly in her lap. Her calm looked almost supernatural now, measured, deliberate, dangerous. Karen stood frozen near the galley, unsure whether to retreat or advance. "You are going to regret this attitude, Mrs. Blake," she said finally. "People get banned from airlines for less." Amara turned her head just enough to meet her eyes. "Do you think I'm afraid of losing access to something I help fund?" Karen frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You will understand soon," Amara said softly. "Keep your eyes on the seat map. It is about to change." The attorney across the aisle checked his own screen and froze. The first-class manifest on his tablet refreshed automatically. Next to Seat 2A, a new label appeared. Priority Account Executive Oversight. He exhaled slowly. "Oh my God," he whispered. The ripple hit instantly. Passengers leaned toward their screens, murmuring, "Did you see that? It says executive. What does that mean?" Karen's hand shook as she looked down at her own tablet. The same words glowed there, highlighted in red. "Executive Oversight?" she read aloud. "That cannot—" Amara interrupted gently, almost kindly. "You might want to stand back. The system does not like obstruction." Karen took half a step back, fear creeping into her posture. The authority she had worn like armor was slipping, piece by piece. Then, over the intercom, the captain's voice returned, tight and uneasy. "Cabin crew, please confirm the identity of the passenger in 2A immediately. We just received a communication from corporate operations." Karen swallowed hard. Her throat felt dry. Maya whispered, "What is happening?" Amara smiled faintly. "Just accountability, Maya. Midair accountability." And as the captain repeated his request, the cabin that once looked down on her began to look around in confusion, searching for who, exactly, was in control of this flight. The captain's voice hung in the air like static that would not fade. "Cabin crew, please confirm the identity of the passenger in Seat 2A. For a moment, no one moved. The air felt heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken realization. Karen Holt's hands twitched as she gripped her service tablet tighter. Her pulse raced beneath the thin fabric of her uniform sleeve. She pressed the earpiece closer. "This is Karen Holt in first class," she said, trying to steady her voice. "The passenger in 2A is listed as Amara Blake. The manifest shows an executive tag. I do not know what that means." The response came instantly. The captain's tone clipped and urgent. It means someone very high up is watching this flight in real time. I need confirmation that everything is under control. Karen's throat constricted. Under control, sir, she lied. But she could feel the eyes on her, dozens of them, each one a quiet accusation. Amara sat motionless, her phone dark again, her gaze steady on the window. She was not smiling. She did not need to. The silence itself had become her statement. Then the intercom chimed once more. A second voice replaced the captain's calmer, firmer, unmistakably corporate. This is Rachel Harris, legal operations for Apex Atlantic Airways. We are observing a live report from Flight 822. Cabin crew, please comply fully with passenger protocol review. The name Apex Atlantic Airways sent a ripple through the first-class cabin. A man in the back whispered, "That is the parent company of this airline," another muttered. "This is serious." Karen's breath caught. "Rachel Harris?" she repeated, her voice trembling. I did not report anything." The voice continued evenly, ignoring her. "Mrs. Blake, please confirm your status. We are verifying your protocol code." Amara lifted her phone, her voice clear and unshaken. "Rachel, this is Amara Blake. Authorization code 731 Gamma. Confirmed," Rachel replied instantly. "Proceeding with escalation." Gasps spread through the cabin. The attorney across the aisle leaned forward, whispering, "She is not just married to someone powerful. She is someone powerful." Karen felt her stomach turn. "What is going on?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "You cannot just take over my flight like this." The overhead speaker buzzed once, then fell silent. The lights flickered just enough to remind everyone that the control of this aircraft did not belong to her anymore. Maya Lin looked down at her trembling hands, then up at Amara. "Ma'am, should I?" Amara interrupted softly, her tone calm but weighted. "You should breathe, Maya. That is enough for now." Karen turned toward her with anger that had nowhere to go. "You think this proves something? That you can humiliate me in front of my crew?" Amara looked at her without malice. "I did not humiliate you. You did that to yourself." The younger attendant, Daniel Cruz, finally spoke again from his jump seat. "She has a direct line to corporate," he said quietly. "That is not standard. No passenger has that kind of access." Maya whispered, "Unless she owns part of the airline." The thought hit the air like lightning. Every whisper stopped. Every breath paused. Karen tried to laugh but failed. "That is impossible." Amara's eyes shifted toward her, and for the first time, she smiled, small, restrained, but enough to send a chill through the cabin. Impossible is a word people use right before they apologize. "Oh." From the cockpit came the captain's voice again, tighter than before. "Corporate just instructed me to maintain stable altitude and to allow full internal audit access during flight. They said, this is their phrase, not mine, do not interfere with the passenger in seat 2A. Maya looked around, her voice soft. "Audit access? While we are flying?" Daniel murmured. "That means they are scanning everything, our logs, our messages, our service reports." Karen's face drained of color. She opened her tablet, but the screen blinked red. "Access locked, compliance review in progress." A sharp beep sounded through the intercom. Then Rachel's voice returned, calm and cutting. "Crew member Karen Holt, you are being placed under temporary suspension pending investigation. Please remain seated and await further instruction upon landing." The cabin went dead quiet. Karen shook her head, disbelief spreading across her face. "You cannot do that. You cannot suspend me midair." "Ugh." Rachel's tone did not waver. "We already have." Karen turned toward Amara, fury and humiliation twisting her expression. "You think this is justice? You are ruining my career because of a spilled drink?" Amara's voice was calm, low, and resonant. "No, your words ruined it long before the drink ever touched me." The passengers watched in complete silence. The humiliation had reversed. The balance of power had changed altitude. A mother in row 3 whispered to her teenage daughter, "That is how you handle power, with silence." Amara glanced toward them and nodded once, as if she had heard. Then she pressed a single button on her phone. A small green icon flashed across the screen. Rachel's voice came through again. "Confirmed, Mrs. Blake. The footage from the onboard cameras has been secured and forwarded to the ethics board. All communications have been logged. The captain has been briefed." Karen sat down hard in the nearest jump seat, her body shaking. "This cannot be happening," she muttered. It was just a misunderstanding. Amara turned slightly toward her. A misunderstanding is when you forget an order. This was intent. The engines hummed beneath them, a steady reminder that the world outside was still moving even as this cabin held its breath. Rachel's final words came over the speaker, clear and final. Protocol 7 complete, awaiting confirmation from ownership. The captain's voice followed, softer now, almost reverent. Copy that. And Mrs. Blake, thank you for your patience. For the first time since the orange juice had fallen, Amara allowed herself to exhale. The sound was almost a sigh, almost a warning. Outside, the clouds parted, and sunlight spilled through the window, painting her calm face in gold. Every passenger could feel it, the shift from humiliation to history. The woman they had seen insulted was not just another passenger. She was a force disguised as silent. The light over the Atlantic shimmered against the metal wing, a reflection so bright it felt almost holy. Inside, the cabin stayed hushed. No one spoke above a whisper, as if raising a voice would break the spell that had taken hold. Karen Holt sat frozen in the jump seat. Her uniform, once perfectly pressed, looked smaller on her now. Every breath she took sounded uneven, like the air itself resisted her. Her eyes darted toward the galley door, but she did not dare move. Across the aisle, Amara Blake sat still in seat 2A, her hands resting on her lap, her phone silent now. The orange stains had dried on her blouse, a quiet emblem of what had happened. She had not changed clothes. She had not asked for assistance. She wore the evidence like armor. Maya Lynn, the young attendant, stood near the service cart, caught between duty and conscience. Her voice was barely a whisper when she said, "Ma'am, do you want me to bring you another towel?" Amara looked up, her expression calm but kind. "No, Maya, let it stay. People forget too easily when things are cleaned too soon." Maya swallowed hard and nodded, her eyes glistening. Behind her, Daniel Cruz stepped closer, his voice low. "The captain told me corporate is on the line with someone from the ownership board. They are asking for live confirmation of the incident." Karen lifted her head sharply. "That is confidential information. You cannot just—" Daniel cut her off. "It is already out of your hands." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. The authority she had carried for 12 years was gone. Her badge, the small silver one clipped to her chest, now felt more like a burden than a symbol of pride. Amara's phone buzzed once, lighting the cabin with a faint blue glow. She lifted it gently, her voice steady. "Rachel, I am still here." As in. The speakerphone filled the quiet with Rachel Harris's composed tone. "Thank you, Mrs. Blake. We have verified your ownership status. You are listed as primary shareholder for Apex Atlantic Holdings and indirect majority stakeholder of this airline. Please confirm for the record that this incident occurred as reported." Karen flinched. "Primary what?" she whispered. Amara did not look at her. She faced the aisle, her voice level and unflinching. "Confirmed. The incident occurred at 10:47 a.m. Eastern Time between service rounds. A uniformed crew member poured a beverage on me and ordered me to move to coach, citing appearance and status as justification. Every syllable landed like a gavel. Rachel's voice remained calm, deliberate. "Thank you, Mrs. Blake. We are recording. Continue when ready." Amara's tone deepened slightly, resonant and controlled. The event represents not only personal humiliation but systemic failure. I am requesting immediate review of all service conduct on Flight 822 and any previous complaints involving discriminatory language or treatment. Maya closed her eyes briefly, as if bracing herself. Daniel looked down at his shoes. The passengers, white, black, Latino, Asian, sat in silence, united by discomfort and dawning respect. Karen finally spoke, her voice trembling. "You cannot do this from inside the plane. There are procedures." Amara turned toward her slowly. "You used procedure as a weapon. I am using it as justice." Her words carried no anger, only precision. The attorney from earlier cleared his throat softly. "Mrs. Blake, for what it is worth, I witnessed everything from start to finish. If the board requests testimony, I will provide it." Amara nodded once. "Thank you, sir." Rachel's voice came through again, firmer now. "Mrs. Blake, we are escalating to the executive branch. Do you wish to pursue direct action before landing?" A long silence followed. Amara looked out the window, her reflection framed by the sky. Somewhere below them, Thousands of miles of clouds shifted and broke apart. When she spoke again, her tone was almost poetic. "I will not let her keep flying over the people she refuses to see," Rachel replied. "Understood. Preparing documentation for in-flight dismissal protocol." The words alone were enough to make the cabin erupt in whispers. "What does that mean?" someone asked. "Can they actually fire her while we are in the air?" another whispered. "Yes," the attorney said quietly. "When the owner says it, yes." Karen's breathing turned shallow. "This cannot be real. You would end my career over a misunderstanding?" Amara faced her squarely. "You ended your own career the moment you poured that glass. What you saw when you looked at me was not a mistake. It was prejudice wearing confidence." Ugh. The engines roared louder for a moment as the aircraft passed through a bank of thin clouds. Sunlight flashed again across Amara's face, catching the quiet steel in her eyes. Then Rachel's voice returned, sharp and procedural. "Per Apex Atlantic bylaws, any staff member found in violation of bias or misconduct policy is subject to immediate administrative suspension. This notice applies effective immediately to employee Karen Holt. Captain, please confirm acknowledgement." Ends. The intercom crackled. The captain's voice, low and measured, replied, "Acknowledged." Karen gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. "You cannot just—" Amara interrupted softly. "You should stop speaking now. Every word will only write the ending faster." Tears welled in Karen's eyes, but she stayed silent. Rachel's tone softened slightly. "Mrs. Blake, the system log now reflects the suspension. Corporate legal will meet the aircraft upon landing. Do you wish to address the passengers?" Amara hesitated, then rose slowly from her seat. The air seemed to shift with her movement. She looked at each row, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had been quiet too long. "What happened here is not about one seat or one spill. It is about the habit of assuming who belongs and who does not. Some of you watched and said nothing. I understand that silence. I have lived with it my entire life. But today, silence ends at 30,000 feet. Ugh." Her words hung in the air, pulsing like a heartbeat. The mother and daughter in row 3 nodded quietly. Maya Lin wiped her eyes. Daniel stood a little taller. Amara sat back down, calm again, the storm now behind her. Outside, the horizon stretched open and endless. Inside, history was being rewritten, one altitude at a time. The plane hummed steadily through clear skies, but inside the cabin, the atmosphere was anything but calm. The air felt charged, dense with the weight of revelation. The passengers who once whispered about inconvenience now sat upright, aware that they had witnessed something historic. Karen Holt remained in the jump seat, eyes hollow, body rigid. Her mind ran in circles, replaying the sound of the announcement over and over. Per Apex Atlantic bylaws, immediate suspension. 12 years of service reduced to a sentence carried by static. She stared at her hands, now trembling, wondering when she had stopped seeing passengers as people. Maya Lin stood a few steps away, still near the service cart. Her hands fidgeted with the corner of her apron. She had only been with the airline 6 months, still believing that kindness could smooth tension. But nothing about this was smooth. The woman she admired in seat 2A had just turned an entire corporate structure upside down, and Maya felt the tremor in her bones. Amara Blake remained silent. The calm that surrounded her seemed almost supernatural now, like the eye of a storm. Her phone rested face down on the tray table, and the faint hum of the engines filled the silence between heartbeats. Then the captain's voice came through again, cautious and formal. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We have received confirmation from corporate headquarters that this matter is under full investigation. We will be proceeding to Los Angeles as scheduled. We appreciate your cooperation and understanding." The announcement was met with murmurs. One passenger clapped once, uncertainly, then stopped. Another whispered, "She really owns the company?" Amara did not respond. Her gaze was fixed on the clouds outside, watching sunlight slice through them in clean, golden lines. In the galley, Maya leaned close to Daniel and whispered, "Should we do something? Offer her new clothes or at least apologize?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "Not us. It is not our place now. We just watch and learn." But Amara heard them anyway. Her voice came low, warm yet precise. "You can still do the right thing, Maya. Doing nothing is how people like Karen stay powerful." Maya hesitated, Then she walked forward, slow and deliberate, stopping just beside Amara's seat. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for what happened. It should not have. I should have spoken sooner." Amara turned toward her and nodded. "You just did. That is how it begins." Karen's head jerked up. "You do not have to apologize for me," she snapped. Her voice was brittle, desperate. "I followed procedure." Amara's tone remained quiet. "Procedure built by prejudice is not order, Karen. It is control disguised as professionalism." The cabin grew quiet again. The passengers were no longer mere observers, they were witnesses. Every word now carried the weight of testimony. A teenage boy near row 4 whispered to his mother, "She sounds like she is teaching them." His mother replied softly, "Maybe she is." Then Amara's phone vibrated once more. She turned it over and read the message without expression. Rachel Harris's name glowed on the screen. Corporate counsel requests immediate live statement for board documentation. Audio recording begins in 60 seconds. Amara inhaled deeply, her eyes closing for a moment. When she opened them again, her expression was resolute. "Captain," she said calmly into the air, "please confirm open channel." The captain responded within seconds. "Channel is live." Rachel's voice followed, clear through the intercom. "Mrs. Blake, this is the Apex Atlantic Board of Directors. We are listening." Amara's tone was smooth, deliberate. "This is Amara Blake, majority shareholder and co-founder. I am confirming the incident on Flight 822 as official grounds for a zero-tolerance review on racial misconduct. Effective immediately, I am initiating Policy Reformation Directive 14. The words seemed to electrify the air. No one moved. Rachel's voice returned, calm but almost reverent. "Understood, Mrs. Blake. All Apex subsidiaries will be notified within the hour." Karen blinked, stunned. "You are rewriting company policy from the air?" Amara met her gaze. "Change does not wait for landing." Daniel stared, wide-eyed. "Directive 14. That is the policy that holds executives accountable, not just crew." Amara gave a faint smile. "Exactly. Justice does not stop at the uniform." Outside, sunlight rippled across the clouds, casting the cabin in alternating bands of gold and shadow. Every shift in light felt like punctuation to what was unfolding. The attorney who had spoken earlier lifted his phone, speaking quietly into the camera. "For anyone watching this later, remember this moment. This is what power looks like when it stops asking for permission." Karen exhaled hard, her voice breaking. "You do not understand. I worked my whole life for this job. My father was a pilot. I grew up believing people respected this uniform." Amara looked at her with neither anger nor pity. "Respect is not in the uniform. It is in the way you treat people. You forgot that somewhere along the way." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "I made a mistake." Amara's voice softened. "You made a choice. A mistake ends when it happens. A choice continues." The hum of the engines deepened as the aircraft began a gentle descent toward the western horizon. The captain announced they would begin preparations for landing in 30 minutes. Maya lingered near the aisle, unable to return to her station. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "how do you stay so calm?" "I would have shouted. I would have cried." Amara smiled faintly. "Because silence makes them hear themselves. The loudest sound in a room is their own conscience." The words struck every listener like a truth they had been avoiding. The mother in row 3 reached for her daughter's hand. "Remember this," she whispered. "Never let anyone decide your worth by your seat." "Oh." As the plane tilted slightly toward the setting sun, light flooded the cabin in a final burst of orange and gold, the same color as the juice that had started it all. And in that light, Amara's calm face looked almost radiant, not with pride, but with certainty. The certainty that dignity, when held long enough, becomes its own kind of revolution. The descent toward Los Angeles had begun, but no one in the cabin dared to look away from Amara Blake. The soft glow of the setting sun spilled across her seat, turning the once-stained blouse into something that shimmered with quiet defiance. Every passenger felt the weight of what they had witnessed, yet no one dared to fill the silence. It was no longer the hush of fear, it was the silence of respect. Karen Holt remained motionless in her jump seat, staring straight ahead, face pale and eyes unfocused. Every few seconds, her throat twitched as if she wanted to speak but could not find words. Her badge still caught the light from the overhead lamp, but it no longer meant anything. It was a relic of power that had already left her hands. The aircraft cruised smoothly over the Pacific. its silver wings cutting through a sky painted in streaks of violet and gold. Inside, the tension had settled into something solemn, heavy, almost sacred. Amara's phone vibrated softly once more. She turned it over, the glow from the screen reflecting in her eyes. Rachel Harris's voice came through the cabin speakers again, calm and measured. "Mrs. Blake, the board has approved your directive. Effective immediately, Apex Atlantic Airways will begin mandatory bias training for all global staff. Additionally, public acknowledgement of your ownership will be issued upon landing. Do you wish to add a personal statement?" Amara's gaze swept the cabin, her eyes landing briefly on each passenger who had watched her humiliation unfold. Some looked down, others met her eyes and held them, silently apologizing without words. She spoke slowly, her tone deliberate and unshaken. "Yes, Rachel, I have a statement." The cabin lights dimmed slightly as if the plane itself wanted to listen. The faint hum of the engines became the only sound under her voice. "Every system that ignores prejudice allows it to grow," Amara began. Today was not about spilled juice or rudeness. It was about something far older and more corrosive assumption. The assumption that skin color defines access, that quiet means weakness, that wealth wears a label. I have carried those assumptions my whole life, and I am tired of pretending they are invisible. So here, at 30,000 feet, I am ending that silence. Rachel's voice came through, subdued and respectful. "Your words are being recorded for the company log, Mrs. Blake," Amara continued, her tone steady, her voice warm but iron-edged. "This airline will not change because of a speech or a single policy. It will change because people like Maya choose courage over comfort, because witnesses choose to speak, and because dignity will no longer whisper when it deserves to be heard." Maya blinked back tears. Daniel stood straighter, his chin lifted slightly. A few passengers nodded. One woman murmured, "Amen." Karen finally turned toward Amara, her voice fragile. "You are right about assumption. I assumed you were someone who did not belong here. I am sorry." Amara's expression did not soften, but her tone remained even. "Apology is a start, not an ending. What you do after you land will show if it meant anything." Karen swallowed hard and nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I understand." A long moment passed. The aircraft began its gradual descent through a field of pink and orange clouds. The intercom crackled softly. "Cabin crew, prepare for landing," the captain said, his tone careful and reverent. Maya hesitated near Amara's seat, unsure if she should speak again. Amara looked up at her and said quietly, "You should sit. You have done enough." But Maya shook her head. "No, ma'am. Not yet. I want to stay standing when we land. I need to remember what courage looks like." Amara's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Then stand tall." The mother in row 3 squeezed her daughter's hand. "You see," she whispered, "grace is stronger than anger." The teenage boy in row 4 whispered to his father, "Dad, she just changed an airline mid-flight." His father answered, "She changed more than that." The seatbelt light flicked on with a soft chime. The descent grew steeper, the engines humming louder. The city lights began to glimmer far below. Tiny constellations spread across the earth. Amara looked out the window again, the glow of Los Angeles rising toward her. Her reflection stared back, composed, quiet, powerful. She thought of the first time she had been told she did not belong somewhere. She had been 16, standing in the lobby of a hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina, wearing her best Sunday dress. The manager had asked her to wait outside until her parents arrived. They had been the ones staying there. That memory had never left her, it had become her foundation. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "You cannot erase what builds you." The plane jolted gently as it broke through a thin layer of clouds. The captain's voice came again. "Flight attendants, please take your seats for landing." Karen did not move. She sat still, eyes closed, her hands gripping the straps of her harness. Maya and Daniel took their places, but exchanged a glance that said everything relief, awe, and an unspoken understanding that they had just seen history. The cabin dipped slightly, and through the window, the glowing outline of the California coast appeared. The passengers craned their necks to look, but their attention drifted back to Amara, who sat in the same posture she had held for nearly 2 hours, unmoved, unbroken. Rachel's voice returned softly. "Mrs. Blake, ground operations have been notified. Media and corporate legal will be waiting upon arrival. We will ensure privacy for you until you decide otherwise." Ugh, Amara replied calmly. Thank you, Rachel. That will not be necessary. If they want to see the truth, they can see it here, exactly as it happened. Her words landed with quiet finality. The aircraft dipped lower, the lights of the runway now visible, shimmering like a promise. As the wheels touched the ground with a muted thud, a collective exhale filled the cabin. The passengers looked around, unsure whether to applaud or remain silent. Amara's gaze remained steady on the forward aisle. She did not look triumphant. She looked resolved. The victory was not in the firing, nor in the exposure. It was in the stillness she had maintained while the world caught up to her dignity. Somewhere in the rear of the plane, someone whispered, "That was justice in motion." And as the aircraft rolled to a slow, deliberate stop, the quiet inside was louder than applause. The wheels screeched softly against the runway, a sound that broke the trance holding the cabin. The plane slowed, the vibration deep enough to hum through the floor and into every passenger's feet. Through the windows, Los Angeles glowed like an electric ocean, streetlights, headlights, and the shimmer of the Pacific merging in the distance. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady but quieter than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles International Airport. The local time is 6:42 p.m. Please remain seated while we taxi to the gate." Oh, his words sounded routine, but nothing about the moment was ordinary. Everyone in first class stayed still, their bodies tense with unspoken awareness that the landing did not mean the story was over. Karen Holt still sat in the jump seat, her hands clasped in her lap, trembling slightly. Her mind was blank except for the echo of her own words. "You people never learn." She had said it without thought, like breathing, and now it rang in her skull like a confession she could not take back. Maya Lin, still standing near the aisle, glanced toward Amara Blake. The older woman had not moved since touchdown. The orange stain on her blouse had darkened, but her posture remained perfect, her expression unreadable. Power did not need to be loud, it could simply refuse to bend. The seatbelt light dinged off. Passengers began to stir, reaching for their phones, their coats, their courage. A few tried to meet Amara's gaze, but she did not look their way. The hush in the cabin was deeper than fear, it was respect built on realization. Then the intercom clicked again, and the captain's voice returned. "Mrs. Blake, corporate representatives are waiting at the gate per your instructions. We have been asked to deplane all other passengers first. Please confirm." Amara's response came calmly without raising her head. "No, Captain. Let everyone leave as planned. No exceptions." There was a brief pause before the captain replied, "Understood." "Huh?" Karen lifted her head slowly. "You do not have to do this," she said, her voice cracked and small. "They are waiting out there. You can end my career quietly." Amara turned to her, her tone composed but cutting. "Quiet endings are how injustice survives. What happens next will happen in the open, where silence cannot protect anyone." Karen's eyes filled with tears again. She nodded once, as if finally surrendering to gravity. The doors opened with a hiss. A rush of airport air spilled into the cabin, cool, sharp, alive with distant echoes of engines and chatter. The light outside was golden, the sun hovering low beyond the terminal glass. The first passengers began to leave, moving slowly, careful not to make noise, as if afraid that a single sound might break the fragile balance. Some paused near Amara's seat. One woman whispered, "Thank you." Another said, "You made us see." Amara did not answer either of them. She simply inclined her head slightly, her eyes focused forward. Maya stepped aside, helping people with their bags. Her hands no longer shook. Every time she looked at Amara, she felt steadier, as if witnessing something larger than a single act of courage, something generational. When the cabin was nearly empty, a man in a dark navy uniform stepped aboard. His badge read Apex Atlantic Operations Director. Two people followed behind him, a woman in a black suit holding a tablet, and a security officer in plain clothes. The air shifted again, heavier, more official. The director nodded to Amara first. "Mrs. Blake, we have been fully briefed." His voice was respectful, almost deferential. "May we proceed?" Amara nodded once. "Yes, do what needs to be done." He turned to Karen. "Miss Holt, you are hereby relieved of duty effective immediately. Your credentials are suspended pending formal review. Please hand over your badge and access key." Karen's hands shook as she unpinned the badge from her chest. The tiny metal clip caught on the fabric. It resisted, like it knew what was happening. Finally, it came free. She placed it into the director's hand without a word. He nodded to the security officer. Escort her to the terminal. She will be met by compliance personnel. Karen stood, every motion mechanical. Before leaving, she turned toward Amara. Her voice trembled, thin and raw. You could have just complained to corporate. You did not have to destroy me. Amara looked at her steadily. I did not destroy you. I revealed you. The world did the rest. Karen lowered her gaze and walked toward the exit. The sound of her shoes on the floor was the only thing anyone could hear until the door closed behind her. Silence again. The operations director exhaled softly, almost in disbelief. Mrs. Blake, I have never seen anything like this in my 20 years. The entire board watched it unfold live. Amara turned her head slightly, her voice calm. Then maybe next time, someone will think before humiliating a woman for how she looks. He nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. Rachel Harris's voice returned faintly through the cabin speaker, softer now, like a closing chapter. Mrs. Blake, media presence confirmed at Gate 7. Would you like us to arrange a private escort? Amara shook her head. No. I will walk out like every other passenger. And, the director hesitated. Mrs. Blake, there will be cameras. Amara replied. Let them film. They should see what accountability looks like. She rose slowly, adjusting her blouse with calm, deliberate movements. The dried orange stain caught the light again, ugly, undeniable, powerful. Maya watched her and whispered, It still shows. Amara glanced at her. It should. They began to move toward the exit together. The hum of the terminal grew louder, voices blending with announcements, footsteps, and the low rumble of luggage wheels. At the doorway, the director stepped aside to let her pass first. Amara paused and looked back once, scanning the empty cabin where everything had happened. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but certain. This space will remember me long after I leave it. Then she walked forward into the light, the cameras flashing in the distance like small, frantic stars. Outside, the crowd parted instinctively, unsure whether to applaud or stay silent. Some held up phones. Others simply watched. Amara did not raise her chin higher or slow her pace. She did not need to. Every step she took carried the weight of every silent moment that came before. And when her feet touched the solid ground of the jet bridge, it felt less like the end of a flight and more like the beginning of something permanent. The air in the jet bridge was cold and metallic, humming faintly with the sound of the terminal beyond. For a second, Amara Blake stood still, letting the cool air wash over her face. Behind her, the cabin door closed with a soft thud, a quiet punctuation to everything that had just happened in the sky. In front of her, the tunnel glowed with artificial light. It should have felt like any other arrival, yet the air carried tension thick enough to touch. Cameras waited at the far end. Flashlights flickered through the glass windows like fireflies. Voices rose, muffled but eager, as the crowd realized who was about to emerge. Maya Lin stepped behind her, hands still clasped tightly in front of her uniform. Ma'am, she whispered, her voice trembling. There are reporters. I can clear a path if you prefer not to face them. Amara shook her head slowly. You cannot clear what must be seen. Maya swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. The operations director followed a few paces behind, speaking softly into his headset. Control, this is ground command. Passenger Blake is exiting now. Security confirmed at Gate 7. Maintain perimeter clearance. The sound of his voice faded under the rising noise of the terminal. When Amara stepped through the glass doors into the gate area, the light shifted warm, blinding, alive. Dozens of people had gathered beyond the barrier ropes. Journalists, passengers from other flights, airport staff who had heard the story before the plane even landed. Phones lifted, cameras clicked, flashes burst like tiny explosions. The murmur rippled through the crowd. That's her. The woman from the plane. She owns the airline. Amara did not speak. She walked forward, unhurried, her expression calm. The orange stain on her blouse gleamed under the fluorescent lights. It had become something else now, no longer humiliation, but a mark of proof. Reporters called out questions one after another. Mrs. Blake, is it true you fired a flight attendant midair? Did you activate an executive protocol during the flight? Are you going to press charges? Amara did not stop walking. Her heels clicked evenly against the polished floor, a steady rhythm that overpowered the noise. Maya stayed close behind her, trying to absorb the flashes with her own body. but Amara's calm presence made the chaos around her seem almost distant. Halfway through the terminal, a man in a dark suit approached, holding a microphone. "Mrs. Blake," he said respectfully, "what message would you like to send to the public after what happened today?" Amara stopped for the first time since leaving the plane. The crowd's murmurs fell into an uneasy silence. Her voice was clear, steady, and resonant. Power is not about shouting. It is about standing so still that injustice trips over itself, trying to move you. The crowd went quiet. Cameras clicked in the silence that followed. She continued, her tone deep and unwavering. Today was not about wealth. It was about dignity. Every person who watched what happened on that flight should ask themselves one question: how often have you seen it and stayed silent? How many times have you let someone else carry the weight of your discomfort? Her words struck like thunder wrapped in velvet. Even the reporters forgot to speak. Maya blinked rapidly, tears threatening to spill. The operations director lowered his headset slightly, his face softening as if the words were meant for him too. Amara paused again, glancing toward the glass wall overlooking the runway. Planes rolled in and out, anonymous and unbothered, metal birds repeating their endless journeys. "You see those planes?" she said softly. "They belong to everyone who steps inside them with hope, not just the people whose names appear on documents. If a woman like me can still be told she does not belong in first class, then we are not flying forward, we are just circling prejudice at 30,000 feet. A murmur of awe rippled through the crowd. Phones rose higher. The lights flashed brighter. Amara turned to the reporters once more. "This will not be handled behind closed doors. Apex Atlantic Airways will begin a full public audit of all discrimination complaints, past and present, not because it looks good, but because it is long overdue, and I will oversee it myself." A man near the front shouted, "Does that mean more firings?" Amara met his eyes without hesitation. "It means more truth." Maya looked at her, stunned by how effortlessly those words carried command. There was no anger, no gloating, only the certainty of justice spoken aloud. The crowd parted slightly as Amara moved forward again. The security officers at the gate stepped aside, their postures shifting from protection to reverence. Rachel Harris's voice came faintly through Amara's phone again. "Mrs. Blake, ground transport is ready whenever you are." Amara replied quietly, "Not yet." "Oh." She turned to Maya and said, "Walk with me to the exit." Maya nodded. "Yes, Mom." As they walked together through the terminal, passengers from other gates began to clap, not loudly, but in waves, uncertain at first, then steady, like distant rain. The applause spread until it filled the space, echoing down the long glass corridor. Amara did not turn or wave. She simply kept walking, every step deliberate, every breath measured. The applause was not for victory, it was for revelation. When she reached the final stretch of the concourse, she stopped beside a large window overlooking the runway. Beyond it, the airplane she had arrived on sat still, its door closed, its engines silent. She stared at it for a long time before speaking again, her voice barely above a whisper. "People think justice is about punishment. It is not. It is about memory, about making sure the next person never has to prove they belong." Maya looked out the window beside her. "Do you think it will change things?" Amara's expression softened. "Not right away. Change never moves fast enough. But it moves." A gust of wind rattled the glass, carrying the faint smell of jet fuel and ocean air. It mixed with the echo of applause that still lingered behind them. Amara turned, her reflection framed in the glass like a woman standing between past and future. "Let them keep clapping," she said quietly. "It means they finally heard." And then she walked toward the terminal doors, where sunlight and camera flashes merged into one blinding light, the kind of light that reveals everything it touches. Outside the terminal, the late evening light stretched long across the pavement, painting the runway in gold and shadow. A faint breeze carried the smell of jet fuel and ocean salt through the air. It should have been the same airport Amara Blake had departed hours ago, yet it felt transformed, as if justice itself had landed with her. Cameras still flashed behind the security ropes, but now the noise was quieter, more reverent. The frenzy of curiosity had turned into something else, respect, even awe. People spoke her name like they were repeating a truth they had only just discovered. Amara walked slowly across the polished floor toward the exit, her heels striking a calm rhythm against the tile. Maya Lin walked beside her, still in uniform, still wide-eyed from everything that had unfolded. The young attendant's face held a mixture of disbelief and devotion, the look of someone who had seen power shift from words to reality. A convoy of sleek black vehicles waited outside, but Amara paused at the glass doors before stepping out. "I want a minute," she said softly. The operations director, who had escorted her from the plane, nodded and stepped aside. He had spent 2 decades in aviation, seen storms, strikes, and scandals, but never something that made the ground feel as alive as the air. Amara's gaze moved through the glass to the runway beyond. Planes taxied under the fading sun, their silver wings catching light like blades. She thought about the irony the sky had always been her sanctuary, yet even there, she had been told she did not belong. Maya's voice broke the silence, gentle and careful. "Mrs. Blake, what happens now?" Amara's eyes did not leave the runway. "Now," she said, "they learn, and I make sure they never forget." Maya hesitated. "You mean the company?" "I mean everyone," Amara replied. "Every passenger, every worker, every person who thinks dignity depends on where someone sits." Behind them, one of the reporters from earlier approached the security barrier, his camera lowered now. "Mrs. Blake," he called out, "would you take one last question?" Amara turned slightly toward him. "One," she said simply. The reporter's tone was respectful but curious. "When you first boarded that flight, did you know this would happen? Did you expect to face something like this?" Her expression softened, though her posture remained unbroken. "I did not expect it," she said, "but I was prepared for it. Every black woman who has ever walked into a room built by someone else learns to be ready for the moment she is reminded it was not built for her." The reporter nodded slowly. "And what would you say to the people who will call this an overreaction?" Amara's eyes sharpened. Overreaction is a word people use when they have never been the one humiliated. If this feels too much, it is because too many people have done too little for too long. Her words cut through the evening air like a steady current of electricity. The cameras clicked again, not with intrusion but with reverence, each flash freezing a moment that already felt like history. Maya stood a little taller beside her. "You did not even raise your voice," she whispered. Amara gave a faint smile. "Power does not shout, Maya. It simply refuses to move." The operations director stepped forward again, his voice careful. "Mrs. Blake, the board has confirmed that your statement has gone public. Social channels are already carrying it across all major outlets." Amara nodded. "Then let them talk. Let them debate. As long as they are saying something, they are no longer pretending they do not see." The director hesitated before adding, "Corporate legal has also requested a private statement before the press release goes global." Amara turned her gaze toward him. "I already gave my statement. It was heard by everyone who needed to hear it." He nodded, understanding that there was nothing else to say. For a long moment, she stood there in silence, watching the planes take off one by one, each disappearing into the rose-colored horizon. She thought of the first time she had ever flown years ago, when a ticket to anywhere felt like a dream. Back then, she had looked out the window with wonder. Today, she looked out with purpose. The soft buzz of her phone drew her back. It was a message from Rachel Harris. Media coverage expanding rapidly, trending globally under hashtag "the flight that changed everything." Amara's thumb hovered over the screen, but she did not reply. She turned off the phone instead. Some things were meant to exist beyond headlines. Maya broke the silence again. "Mrs. Blake, are you all right?" Amara turned toward her, her expression thoughtful. "I am not all right. I am awake, and sometimes that is harder." Maya nodded slowly. "You make it look easy." Amara gave a quiet laugh, almost a whisper. "It has never been easy. It has just been necessary." The automatic doors slid open, letting in a gust of night air. The hum of the city beyond the engines, the distant horns, the low chatter felt like the pulse of the world waking up to something new. Before stepping outside, Amara turned back toward the terminal one last time. Through the glass, she could see the faint reflection of herself, the orange stain still marking her blouse, the calm in her eyes, the power in her stillness. She spoke softly, not to anyone in particular. "For every woman who was told to sit down, this is for you. For every man who chose silence when he should have spoken, this is for you too. May we all stop mistaking comfort for peace." Maya watched her in awe, the kind that feels less like admiration and more like witnessing a promise kept. Together, they stepped into the night. The cameras followed, but Amara did not flinch. The lights no longer blinded her. They revealed her. The world outside was noisy, alive, relentless, but she moved through it like calm through chaos. Somewhere far behind them, the airplane's engines began to roar again, preparing for another journey. But this time, the sound was different. It did not echo with arrogance or assumption. It sounded like change taking flight. The city lights of Los Angeles burned in the distance like a galaxy scattered across the ground. As Amara Blake stepped outside, the cool evening air hit her face, a mix of jet, exhaust, ocean wind, and possibility. Cameras still flashed in quick white bursts, but the noise around her had begun to fade. The world could talk all it wanted. She had already spoken. A black sedan waited by the curb. Its polished surface reflected the light from the terminal windows, turning every flash into a pulse. The driver stood beside the car door, silent, composed, professional. When he saw Amara, he bowed his head slightly. "Mrs. Blake," he said, "welcome home." For a moment, she did not move. She turned her head, looking back at the glass wall of the terminal behind her. Through it, she could still see the reflection of the runway lights stretching endlessly into the horizon. Planes came and went, rising and falling, indifferent to what had just happened inside one of them. Maya Lin stood near the doorway, unsure whether to follow. The young attendant looked exhausted yet transformed, her uniform wrinkled from the long flight, but her eyes alive with something new conviction. Amara approached her slowly. "You are not coming?" she asked gently. Maya shook her head. "I need to stay. I have to finish the report with the crew office. They said they will ask me questions." Amara studied her face for a long moment. "Do not let them change your story," she said quietly. "Truth has a way of shrinking when it gets scared. Keep it big." Maya nodded. "I will." Her voice trembled, but her gaze stayed steady. "Thank you for everything, for not yelling, for showing that silence can fight too." Amara smiled faintly. "Silence does not fight, it waits, and when it finally speaks, the world listens." Maya blinked back tears. "I will remember that." Amara reached into her handbag and took out a small white business card. "If they make you uncomfortable, call the number on this card. They will handle it." Maya accepted the card with both hands, bowing her head slightly. "Yes, ma'am." Amara turned toward the car again. As she reached for the handle, her phone vibrated. She glanced down. It was a message from Rachel Harris. Corporate statement issued. Global response overwhelmingly positive. Internal teams request your guidance for immediate cultural restructuring. Board awaiting your confirmation for next steps. Amara locked the screen without replying. Not everything needed her voice yet. Some moments required space to breathe. She slid into the back seat, the soft leather sighing beneath her. The driver closed the door quietly and took his place behind the wheel. The world outside blurred as the car began to move, headlights slicing through the dark. For the first time in hours, Amara let herself exhale fully. The sound filled the quiet cabin like a release she had been holding since takeoff. Her reflection in the tinted window looked different now, stronger, older, freer. The orange stain still marked her blouse, though faint in the dim light. She did not care. It was a scar the world needed to see. Her mind wandered back to the sky, to the precise moment when the glass of juice had shattered against her skin. The shock, the silence, the smell of citrus and insult. She had felt the sting not just of liquid but of memory. Every time someone had questioned her belonging, every time she had been mistaken for less than what she was, every moment she had chosen to stay silent rather than defend her dignity, all of it had fused into that one instant. But she had stayed still. She had remembered who she was, and now the world remembered too. The city rushed by outside neon lights, billboards, traffic that shimmered like molten glass. Somewhere, a radio announcer's voice leaked faintly through the driver's speaker, mid-sentence. The viral footage now confirmed by Apex Atlantic Airways. The company's majority shareholder, Amara Blake, was reportedly the passenger involved. The driver lowered the volume quickly, glancing in the mirror. "Sorry, ma'am." "It is fine," Amara said. "Let them talk. They have earned the silence of listening." The car rolled past the edge of the airport property, merging onto a freeway glowing with headlights. The hum of the tires against asphalt sounded almost musical, a rhythm she could breathe to. After several minutes, her phone vibrated again. This time, it was a private call. The screen read, "Elias Blake, her husband." She hesitated before answering. "Elias," she said softly. His voice came warm, deep, steady. "You are safe?" "Yes," she replied. "I saw everything," he said. "The board looped me in before you landed. I wanted to get on the next jet to Los Angeles, but Rachel said you had it handled." Amara smiled faintly. "I did." There was a pause. "You were extraordinary," he said. "I watched you sit through humiliation with the same calm you use in negotiations. You did not raise your voice once. You did not need to." Her eyes softened. "I have spent a lifetime learning when to speak. Sometimes silence delivers the message better than any microphone." He chuckled quietly. "That is why they call you the storm in still water." Amara looked out the window at the city passing by. "It is not a storm, Elias. It is balance. I just showed them what happens when balance meets arrogance at altitude." He laughed softly, but the sound faded into something more thoughtful. "You know this will be everywhere by morning. You did not just make a statement. You started something bigger." "I hope so," she said. "The world keeps pretending that change requires noise. It does not. It requires truth." Another silence followed, gentle, intimate. "I am proud of you," Elias said finally. "Come home. We will talk when you are ready." "I am on my way," she said quietly. When the call ended, Amara closed her eyes. The rhythm of the road felt like a lullaby. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to feel tired, not weak, but human. Outside, Los Angeles blurred past in waves of gold and red. Billboards flashed her name, already transformed into headlines she had not asked for. But she did not look at them. She simply watched the horizon grow darker. When the car turned off the freeway toward the hills, she whispered to herself, "Tonight, I will rest. Tomorrow, I will begin." Oh. And as the city faded behind her, the quiet in the car felt different, not the silence of endurance, but the peace that follows justice when it finally lands. The car wound its way up through the hills, the lights of Los Angeles glittering below like scattered gold dust. The city stretched endlessly across the dark, alive and indifferent, while the woman in the back seat carried a calm that had nothing to do with exhaustion. It was the quiet that comes after a storm, a silence earned, not given. Amara Blake sat back against the leather seat, her hands folded lightly in her lap. The scent of citrus still clung faintly to her blouse. It was no longer a reminder of humiliation, it was a reminder of victory. The stain was proof, a visible memory that the world could not rewrite. The driver took a turn through a gated neighborhood where every house sat behind high hedges and quiet security. The car slowed, then stopped in front of a modern mansion built from glass and stone. The gates opened automatically, responding to an unseen signal, and the vehicle glided through. Inside, the driveway lights rose gradually as they approached the entrance. It was serene, almost ceremonial. The doors opened before the car even came to a full stop. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out of the house, his posture both commanding and familiar. Elias Blake. His expression was unreadable at first, but as Amara stepped from the car, it softened into relief. "You are home," he said quietly. Amara nodded, her voice calm. Finally. For a moment, they simply stood there, facing each other under the soft pool of light from the entryway. Then Elias reached for her hand, his grip warm and steady. "I saw everything," he said. Every second of that flight, Rachel had the feed running on the boardroom monitors. Half the directors were standing by the end of it. Amara's brow lifted slightly. "Standing?" He smiled faintly. "Standing. Yes. Not one of them dared to speak while you were talking. You did not just defend yourself, Amara. You reset the tone of the company." She exhaled slowly, a breath that carried the weight of an entire day. "I did what was necessary." Elias studied her for a long moment. "You did what was right." They walked together into the house. The foyer opened wide, with glass walls that looked out over the entire city. The night air drifted in faintly through the open terrace doors. On the far side of the room, a grand piano sat silent under a soft light, next to a wall of framed photographs, awards, press clippings, and family portraits that documented decades of empire building. Amara stopped near the window, gazing out at the skyline. The city pulsed below, alive with stories. Somewhere down there, her name was flashing on screens across the world. But from this height, the noise could not reach her. Elias poured 2 glasses of water and joined her at the window. "The board already approved your directive," he said. "They are calling it the Blake Amendment. Mandatory anti-bias certification for all staff and executives, effective immediately. The press loves it. Investors are cautious, but they will follow. Amara took a sip of water and nodded. Good, let them learn. He studied her for a long moment. You did not even raise your voice. I did not need to, she replied softly. People listen differently when they have to confront their own silence. Elias smiled faintly. You have always believed that calm was your sharpest weapon. Amara turned toward him. It is not a weapon. It is a mirror. He chuckled quietly, then grew serious. Still, it takes courage to hold that kind of silence when you are being humiliated in public. She looked away toward the window again. It takes memory, she said. Every insult I ever swallowed taught me how to sit still. Every door that closed taught me how to wait until I owned the building. Elias stared at her, his admiration quiet but visible. You are remarkable. Amara shook her head. No, I am persistent. Remarkable is what they call us when they finally notice we were never the problem. The silence that followed was comfortable this time, the kind that fills a space with peace instead of tension. The city lights shimmered like a living heartbeat beneath them. Then Elias spoke again. There is something else you should know. Amara turned to him, her expression unreadable. What is it? He took a deep breath. Karen Holt submitted a formal apology. It came through legal an hour ago. She asked for permission to release it publicly. Oh, Amara's face remained still, but her voice carried quiet weight. Did she write it herself? Yes, Elias said. Rachel confirmed it was not filtered by public relations. Amara turned back toward the window, considering. Let her release it, but tell her one thing. Elias waited. What should I tell her? Tell her that forgiveness is not freedom. It is accountability carried forward. She does not need to apologize to me. She needs to apologize to the next person she might have treated the same way. Elias nodded slowly. I will make sure she knows. The sound of distant thunder rolled faintly across the hills, soft but deep. Rain was rare in Los Angeles, yet the clouds had begun to gather far off beyond the horizon. Amara closed her eyes, listening to the sound. Maybe the sky is learning balance too, she said quietly. Elias smiled. Always poetic, even when you are changing the world. She gave a small laugh, almost weary. Changing the world sounds glamorous until you realize it starts one confrontation at a time. He stepped closer, resting his hand gently against her shoulder. Then rest tonight. Tomorrow you can teach them how to fly better. Amara looked at him, her gaze softening. That is all I ever wanted, to make the sky a place where everyone belongs. The rain began to tap faintly against the glass, slow and rhythmic. The sound was gentle, steady like applause from the clouds. She set her glass down on the counter and took one last look at the city below. It is strange, she said quietly. They thought today was about a plane, but it was never about that. It was about altitude, the difference between who they think we are and how high we have already risen. Elias smiled, his voice low. And you reminded them to look up. Amara turned toward him, her silhouette framed against the storm-lit window. No, she said softly. I reminded them to look again. The first real drop of rain hit the glass, followed by another, then another, until the sound filled the house with a soft, endless rhythm. Inside, Amara Blake finally sat down not as a victim, not as a hero, but as a woman who had turned humiliation into horizon. And outside, under a sky she had just reclaimed, the night began to weep its quiet approval. The rain thickened over the city through the night, washing the glare from the glass towers until Los Angeles looked almost gentle again. Inside the Blake residence, the lights had dimmed to a soft amber hue. Amara sat alone in her study, a quiet room lined with books, screens, and the hum of a world that was now watching her every move. The clock on the wall read 11:28 p.m., but sleep felt impossible. The adrenaline that had carried her through the flight and the storm of cameras was gone, replaced by a deeper hum, an ache that comes not from fatigue, but from awareness. She had done what was right, yet doing what was right always came with a price. A storm of notifications blinked across the tablet screen before her. News outlets replaying the footage, editorials praising her composure, think pieces dissecting every word she had said. But there were also the other headlines, the ones questioning her motives, her tone, her grace. Did she overreact? Was she too calm? Was she using her power unfairly? Amara exhaled slowly and turned off the tablet. The silence that followed was thick, almost alive. She walked toward the large window overlooking the drenched hills. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the sky for just a second before everything fell dark again. She whispered to the night, "They are already rewriting the story." Behind her, a soft sound broke the quiet, a knock on the door, hesitant but firm. "Come in," she said. Elias stepped inside, barefoot, dressed in a simple gray sweater. He looked at her for a moment before speaking. "You should rest, Amara." She turned slightly toward him. "You know I cannot." He nodded, walking closer. "You have been staring at the same window for almost an hour." Amara smiled faintly. "It is not the window I am looking at, it is what comes next." Elias sighed and sat down on the edge of the desk. "The world is moving faster than even you can manage. The clip of the flight has crossed 40 million views. Half the country is debating what you said. The other half is arguing about how you said it." Her jaw tightened slightly. "That is the problem, Elias. They are debating the tone, not the truth. The way I said it matters more to them than what it means." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "That is because you did not scream. You did not give them the reaction they expected. People fear calm power. It makes them realize how small their excuses sound." Amara looked away, her voice lowering. "Sometimes I wonder if calm power is enough." Elias's eyes softened. It was tonight. It was enough to ground a system that has been flying blind for decades. Amara let the words sink in, but she did not answer. The storm outside rattled the glass again, thunder rolling in the distance like an echo of everything she had restrained. Elias stood and walked to the bar cabinet in the corner, pouring 2 glasses of water. "You remember the first time someone told you that you did not belong in first class?" A shadow of memory crossed her face. "Atlanta to Dallas. I was 28. A man sitting next to me asked me if I worked for the airline. I told him no, and he asked if my husband bought the ticket. I said yes, and that my husband's name was on the building we were flying to." Elias smiled. "And he apologized?" "No," she said quietly. "He laughed. He thought it was a joke." The silence that followed was heavy, personal. It was the silence of people who had lived too many of the same stories. Elias handed her a glass. "You turned every insult into strategy, every slight into leverage. Today was just the moment the world finally caught up." Amara took the glass but did not drink. "They will move on soon," she said. "The internet burns hot but forgets fast." Elias nodded. "Then let them forget the headlines, but not the lesson." Amara turned toward the window again. The rain was softer now, sliding down the glass in slow, silvery trails. "Do you know what part still hurts?" she asked quietly. "It is not the words," she said. "It is how normal it felt hearing them, how ordinary cruelty has become." Elias stepped beside her. "That is why you spoke, to make the ordinary sound unacceptable again." Amara's reflection in the glass looked almost like a ghost, composed, steady, but faintly tired. "You make it sound noble," she said. It felt surgical, like cutting open something the world preferred to keep bandaged. "That is what real change feels like," Elias said softly. "It bleeds first." Lightning flared again, and for a heartbeat, both of their reflections glowed against the window like 2 statues carved from light and resolve. Then Amara turned to him. "Tomorrow I want the audit reports from every division: pilot recruitment, crew training, customer complaints, executive culture. I want to see the truth, not the version they send to shareholders." Elias smiled faintly. "Already ordered. Rachel and her team will have everything compiled by noon." Amara nodded. "Good. I do not just want to punish bad behavior. I want to rebuild the system that allows it." Elias's gaze lingered on her. "You are relentless." I have to be," she said, "because prejudice is too. It never sleeps." The rain began to ease outside, the last drops tapping against the glass like a quiet applause. Amara turned away from the window and began gathering the folders on her desk. Elias reached out and stopped her hand gently. "You can work in the morning. Tonight, rest. The sky will still be there tomorrow." She looked at his hand on hers and then at his eyes. The hardness in her face softened for the first time since landing. "You are right," she said quietly. "For tonight, I will let the world spin without me." He smiled. That is all it ever needed to do. Together, they walked toward the hallway. Behind them, the study lights dimmed automatically. The only glow left came from the rain-washed city below, its skyline shimmering like a field of stars reflected in water. Before leaving the room, Amara looked back once more at the desk, at the silent tablet, at the reflection in the glass that had watched her through it all. Her voice was soft but sure. "They thought I made a scene. I only made a mirror." Then she turned away, and the door closed behind her, leaving the room wrapped in quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the start of something larger than even justice itself. The morning arrived quietly, washed clean by the night's rain. Los Angeles shimmered beneath a silver sky, the streets slick and reflective, the air sharp with the scent of renewal. Inside the Blake estate, the house stood still, its silence broken only by the low hum of distant traffic and the rhythmic ticking of a clock that seemed to move slower than usual. Amara Blake awoke before sunrise. Sleep had been brief but deep, the kind that restores the mind even if the body still carries its exhaustion. She sat up slowly, the early light touching the edges of the white curtains. For a moment, she simply listened to the wind outside, to the quiet heartbeat of her own breathing. The world had changed overnight. She knew it the way a sailor senses a shift in the tide before seeing it. Something irreversible had begun. She rose, walked to the window, and pulled the curtains apart. Below, the city looked almost peaceful. She could see the airport in the distance, a thin glint of silver under the clouds. Planes were already rising into the morning air, carrying people who would read her name on their screens before they landed. Behind her, a soft knock came at the door. "Come in," she said. Elias stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee. His voice was gentle, still warm with sleep. "Morning. You beat the sun again." Amara smiled faintly. "I have been awake longer than the news cycle. That is an accomplishment." He handed her the cup. "Rachel sent the first round of reports. They are waiting on your desk." Amara took the coffee but did not drink. "How bad is it?" Elias's expression darkened slightly. "Bad enough to make the headlines look polite." She nodded slowly, unsurprised. "Then it is exactly as I thought." They walked together down the hall toward her study. The house was filled with soft light now, filtered through the morning clouds. When Amara opened the door, the screens across her desk flickered to life automatically. Graphs, documents, and video thumbnails filled the space like an endless constellation of evidence. She scanned one report, her eyes sharp and precise. It detailed bias, complaints filed by staff, cases of exclusion, retaliation, silence, so many names, so many unanswered emails. Elias leaned against the doorway, watching her. "Do you ever get tired of fighting?" Amara looked up from the screen. "No," she said simply. "But I get tired of watching people pretend there is no fight to begin with." He nodded slowly, understanding. She opened another file, this one labeled Customer Incident Review Yearly Summary. She scrolled through it, her jaw tightening as she read. 12 verified discrimination complaints in 1 year. 9 dismissed without investigation. 3 settled quietly, all against women of color. Elias's voice was low. "It is systemic." Amara's tone hardened. "It is deliberate." The word hung in the air, heavy as truth. She closed the files one by one and turned toward him. "Call Rachel. I want every department head in a live conference by noon. Not a briefing, a reckoning." Elias gave a small nod. Understood. As he left, Amara sat down at the desk. The city stretched wide before her, its skyline reflected faintly in the glass. She picked up her phone and pressed a single button. Rachel Harris answered almost instantly. "Good morning, Mrs. Blake." "Rachel," Amara said, her tone calm but firm, "send a message to all staff. Title it, The New Altitude. Include this quote, 'We cannot fly higher if we keep people grounded by bias. Sign it with my name.'" "Yes, ma'am," Rachel said. "It will go out within the hour." Amara paused, her eyes fixed on the city. "And Rachel schedule Karen Holt's disciplinary review for this afternoon. I will attend personally." Rachel hesitated. "Understood." End of Teebling. When the call ended, Amara leaned back in her chair. The phrase, "the new altitude," lingered in her mind. It was more than a memo, it was a warning. Her eyes drifted toward a framed photograph on the wall, her younger self standing beside the first aircraft she ever invested in. She remembered how the metal had gleamed in the sunlight, how the name Apex Atlantic had felt like a promise back then. It was supposed to represent progress, equality, flight without fear. Somewhere along the way, that promise had lost altitude. A flash of memory came 15 years ago, her first meeting with the airline board. The men had called her ambitious, the way some people say naive. One of them had leaned back and asked if she understood how expensive aviation could be. She had smiled and told him that ignorance was far costlier. She had been proving that ever since. Her reverie was interrupted by the soft chime of an incoming call. The screen flashed Apex Atlantic Headquarters Emergency Review Line. She answered. Amara Blake. Rachel's voice came through again, slightly tense. Mrs. Blake, the board has requested that you address the media before the market opens. They believe a personal statement from you will stabilize investor confidence. Amara's tone was measured. Send me the setup location. It is already arranged in the downtown tower, Rachel replied. Press will be live in 90 minutes. Oh, good, Amara said. I will be there in 60. When the call ended, Amara rose from her chair. The decision was not impulsive, it was inevitable. The moment the cameras turned on, the entire world would see what leadership looked like when it refused to hide. Elias re-entered the room, already buttoning his jacket. I take it we are going downtown. Amara smiled slightly. You take it correctly. He looked at her with quiet admiration. You do realize that every word you say will shape the company's legacy for decades. Amara adjusted her blazer, her tone calm but unwavering. Then, I will make sure it sounds like the truth, not a headline. Together, they walked toward the front door. The rain had stopped, leaving the driveway shining under the morning light. The car waited, engine already running. As she stepped outside, Amara paused for just a second, breathing in the crisp air. The world had changed while she slept, but it was not finished changing yet. She turned to Elias, her voice low but resolute. Yesterday, I proved I belonged in the sky. Today, I remind them who built it. The door closed behind her, and the car rolled down the hill, carrying her toward the heart of a city that was still learning how to look up. Downtown Los Angeles gleamed under a pale mid-morning sun, its glass towers catching the light like mirrors aimed at heaven. The streets below were already alive, taxis weaving through traffic, horns echoing faintly, and television vans parked in long rows along the boulevard in front of the Apex Atlantic headquarters. Every network had sent a crew. Every camera was waiting for her. Inside the black sedan, Amara Blake sat in complete silence. The tinted windows cut away the noise, leaving only the soft hum of the engine and the rhythm of her breathing. She stared at her reflection in the glass, calm and centered. The same stain remained faintly visible on her blouse, though mostly hidden now beneath her navy jacket. She had chosen not to change it. Some marks were worth keeping. Elias Blake sat beside her, reading messages from Rachel Harris on his tablet. They are ready for you, he said quietly. Press from 30 outlets, plus live broadcast on every major network. They are calling it the Altitude Address. Amara's tone was even. Then let us make it worth the name. Oh. The car slowed as it turned into the private entrance beneath the building. Security guards opened the doors in synchronized precision. The moment Amara stepped out, flashes erupted from behind the barricades outside. Reporters shouted questions through the noise. Mrs. Blake, are you taking over as CEO? Will the company issue a public apology? Do you plan to meet the crew member you suspended? Amara walked forward without answering. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she entered the lobby, a sound that echoed like punctuation through the vast, high-ceilinged space. The lobby of Apex Atlantic headquarters was built to impress. Vast columns, a glass roof, and a digital mural that displayed the airline's motto, "We rise together." It had never felt more ironic. Rachel Harris was waiting near the elevators, tablet in hand, headset in place. Her composure was professional, but her eyes betrayed a quiet awe. Mrs. Blake, she said, the board is assembled upstairs. The media conference is set for 11 o'clock sharp. Amara nodded. Has Karen Holt arrived for her review? Rachel hesitated. Yes, ma'am. She is in the waiting room with compliance officers. Amara's voice carried no bitterness, only resolve. Good. I will speak with her after the press conference. Elias touched her arm gently. You do not have to confront her yourself. Amara turned to him. Yes, I do. Power only means something when you use it face to face. The elevator doors opened, and the three of them stepped inside. The mirrored walls reflected Amara's calm expression back at her from every angle. The ascent was silent, except for the faint hum of machinery. On the top floor, the boardroom overlooked the entire city. The directors were already seated, their expressions ranging from cautious to reverent. Each of them had watched the viral footage. Each of them now realizing the hierarchy they once controlled had shifted overnight. Amara entered without pause. "Good morning," she said, her tone firm but even. "Let us begin." The chairman, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a measured voice, spoke first. "Mrs. Blake, the board wants to extend its full support and our apologies for what happened." Amara regarded him evenly. "Support is appreciated. Apology is expected. But neither of them rebuilds culture. That is what we will do today." The man nodded. "Of course. The press is ready in the atrium whenever you are." Amara turned to Rachel. "Bring up the slides from the audit report. I want every statistic visible behind me when I speak." Rachel tapped a few keys, and the wall-sized screen behind the table came alive with numbers, complaints ignored, cases dismissed, surveys buried. The truth filled the room like a slow, cold wind. Amara faced the board. This is what happens when a company confuses comfort with success. It flies high while the people inside it are told to stay small. A murmur went around the table. One director cleared his throat. "We are prepared to allocate funding for the reforms you proposed." Amara's eyes narrowed slightly. "Funding is not the issue. Intention is. I am not asking for permission to change this company. I am telling you that it already has changed." Silence followed. Even Elias, standing near the window, smiled faintly at her precision. After a few minutes of discussion, Rachel's headset buzzed. She listened, then looked up. "Mrs. Blake, they are ready for you downstairs." Amara nodded. "Then let us speak to the sky." The elevator ride down was quiet again, but this time the silence felt electric. When the doors opened, the sound of voices surged in like a wave. Hundreds of people, press, staff, onlookers filled the atrium. The air carried the metallic buzz of anticipation. A podium stood at the center, lit by soft white light. Behind it, a massive screen displayed the Apex Atlantic logo and the words, "The New Altitude." Amara walked to the podium slowly, deliberately. Every flash from the cameras caught the calm in her face, the stillness in her posture. She rested her hands on the stand and looked out over the crowd. "Good morning," she began. Her voice carried across the atrium with effortless command. "Yesterday, an incident occurred aboard Flight 822. It began with words that should never be spoken, and ended with a reminder that dignity is not optional, it is essential." The crowd hushed completely, Amara continued. "The world saw one moment, but what you did not see were the countless moments that came before it. Moments of dismissal, doubt, and silent tolerance. Those are the true engines of discrimination, and they have powered this industry for far too long." "Oh," she paused, letting the silence breathe. "Today, that ends. Not because of outrage, but because of accountability. Not because of one woman's humiliation, but because of what that humiliation revealed." The screen behind her shifted, showing footage from the onboard security cameras. Amara sitting in her seat, calm, soaked, silent. The orange juice gleamed like liquid fire in the cabin light. Gasps filled the atrium. Amara's voice did not waver. "That silence you saw was not weakness. It was calculation. It was patience. It was the sound of a system realizing it had underestimated the wrong woman." The audience erupted not in applause, but in the stunned quiet of understanding. Amara's final words came slow and deliberate. "We will rise higher only when everyone on board rises with us. The new altitude begins now." The flashes from the cameras burst again, but this time they looked less like chaos and more like stars, bright, relentless, and finally illuminating the truth. For a long moment after Amara Blake stepped back from the podium, no one moved. The words still hung in the air, heavy and resonant, echoing through the glass atrium like the fading hum of an engine that had just lifted off. Then, slowly, the crowd began to stir. The first sound was not applause, but the low murmur of realization, people whispering, reporters lowering their cameras as if they had witnessed something sacred. A few seconds later, the applause came, hesitant at first, then rising in waves. Amara stood still, not smiling, not performing. Her expression remained calm, her shoulders straight. She did not need to soak in their approval. The silence she had carried from that flight still followed her, and it spoke louder than any cheer. Elias stood near the side of the stage, watching her with quiet pride. He had seen her in boardrooms, on red carpets, in meetings with presidents and billionaires. But he had never seen her like this, untouchable, radiant, and completely unafraid. When the applause began to fade, Rachel Harris approached discreetly from the wings. "Mrs. Blake," she said softly, "the press is requesting interviews. We have major outlets waiting." Amara shook her head gently. "Not today." Rachel nodded, understanding immediately. Some stories were too pure to be broken into sound bites. As they left the stage, a young woman from the operations team stopped her. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "Mrs. Blake, I just wanted to say thank you. My mother worked for this airline for 18 years. She used to come home crying sometimes, but she never said why. Watching you today, it felt like you spoke for her too." Amara's voice softened. "Then make sure your generation does not need someone else to speak for them. Use your seat at the table to build more of them." The young woman nodded, her eyes shining. Elias placed a hand lightly on Amara's back as they walked toward the private elevator. "You realize you just rewrote corporate leadership in less than 10 minutes, he said quietly. Amara's answer was almost a whisper. "No, I just reminded them what leadership is supposed to sound like." The elevator doors closed, sealing away the noise of the crowd below. Inside, the reflection of the city stretched out behind them in the mirrored walls, miles of glass, steel, and motion, all built on systems she was now determined to change. Elias turned to her. "What happens next?" Amara looked ahead, her eyes sharp, her tone deliberate. "Next, I meet Karen Holt." When the doors opened again on the top floor, the air shifted. The boardroom lights had been dimmed, and in the far corner, Karen sat waiting. Her uniform was gone, replaced with a plain black blazer. Her hair was pulled back neatly, but her face looked pale, drained of defiance. Amara crossed the room slowly, the sound of her heels echoing on the polished floor. She stopped a few feet away and studied the woman who had once called her, "You people." Karen rose shakily. "Mrs. Blake," she began. Amara raised a hand gently. "You do not need to explain. You only need to listen." Karen's eyes glistened, and she nodded. Amara's voice was calm, but its weight filled the room. "When you poured that juice, you did not just disrespect me. You disrespected everyone who ever had to earn respect twice, once for their competence, and again for their color. You made me your target, but you revealed something much bigger than either of us." Karen's chin trembled. "I know, and I am sorry. I was angry, stressed, careless." Amara interrupted softly. "You were conditioned, and that is what I am going to change." Karen blinked, confused. "You mean you are not pressing charges?" Amara shook her head. "No, the punishment will not be public. It will be purposeful. You will spend the next 6 months in community programs across the country, not as a face of the airline, but as a student of the people you misjudged. When you return, if you return, you will reapply from the bottom." "Oh." Karen's lips parted, her voice breaking. "You are giving me another chance?" Amara's gaze stayed steady. "No. I am giving you work. Redemption is earned, not granted." For a long moment, Karen could not speak. Then she whispered, "Thank you." Amara turned toward the window, her tone cool but final. "Do not thank me. Thank the chance to begin again." The room fell silent. As Amara walked out, Elias followed behind her. "You could have destroyed her," he said quietly. Amara's voice was soft, almost tired. "Destruction is easy. Reconstruction is legacy." Outside, the clouds had parted, and sunlight poured across the city in wide, golden ribbons. The storm had passed, but the air still carried its charge. For the first time that day, Amara allowed herself to breathe deeply to let the weight of everything settle. The world had seen her stand tall in the face of prejudice. Now it would see how she built higher from it. Justice had landed. Change had taken off. The afternoon light fell in long, golden lines through the glass walls of the Apex Atlantic Tower. The city below was a map of movement cars threading through sunlit streets, planes rising in steady arcs beyond the horizon. Inside, the building that once represented privilege now hummed with quiet transformation. People spoke in lower tones. Meetings began on time, and eyes lifted when Amara Blake passed through the halls. She had become a living reminder that calm could be more commanding than fury. After the meeting with Karen Holt, Amara retreated to her private office, a vast space of glass, stone, and silence. She placed her hands on the cool surface of her desk and closed her eyes for a moment. The hum of the city outside was steady, grounding. For the first time in days, there was no noise, no cameras, no applause, no crisis demanding her response. Just stillness. The door opened softly. It was Rachel Harris, holding a tablet. "Mrs. Blake," she said, "the company's public response has gone viral. The new altitude message has been shared over 3 million times in 6 hours. Our employee network is overflowing with letters of support. People are calling it the rebirth of Apex Atlantic." Amara turned slightly, her expression unreadable. "Numbers are not the same as progress, Rachel. People love to celebrate change before they live it." Rachel nodded respectfully. "Understood, ma'am, but there is something else you should see." She handed over the tablet. On the screen was a short video clip, grainy, recorded on a phone. It showed the teenage boy from row 4 on the flight, standing in front of his classmates, giving a presentation titled, "What Courage Looks Like." He was describing the moment when Amara had looked the flight attendant in the eye and said, "You will regret this." His voice trembled with admiration. She did not yell, the boy said in the video. She just knew, like she had already won. Amara watched the clip in silence. When it ended, she handed the tablet back to Rachel and said softly, "That boy saw more truth in 10 seconds than some adults see in decades." Rachel smiled faintly. "Would you like me to authorize media use of the clip?" Amara shook her head. "No. Let it stay pure. Not everything needs branding." Rachel nodded again, then hesitated. "There is also a message from the United Nations Equality Commission. They want you to deliver the keynote address at their summit next month." Amara's eyebrows lifted slightly. One flight, one speech, and suddenly I am the world's conscience. Rachel allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes that is how history begins. Amara looked out the window. History does not begin in a boardroom or a speech. It begins in the moment someone decides not to look away. Rachel's gaze softened. "Still, it would mean something if you went." Amara nodded slowly. "Yes, it would." Rachel left quietly, closing the door behind her. The office returned to silence. The sunlight had shifted now, falling across Amara's desk, illuminating the orange stain still faintly visible on her blouse sleeve. She brushed it lightly with her fingers, feeling the fabric's texture, the roughness, the reminder. Her phone buzzed once. A message from Elias. "Dinner tonight, no boardrooms, no reporters. Just us." She smiled faintly and typed a single word. "Yes." Then she rose from her desk and walked toward the window. The reflection of the sky shimmered around her. In that glass, she saw both the woman who had been humiliated and the one who had transformed it into power. Her voice was quiet but sure. "The higher they fly, the clearer they will see me." Outside, another plane lifted into the pale sky, its shadow sliding briefly across the city before disappearing into the clouds. And in that brief shadow, the world carried the echo of her calm, an invisible reminder that power, when held with grace, could change not only a company, but the altitude of humanity itself. The city sank into dusk, and the glass of the Apex Atlantic Tower glowed like molten gold against the horizon. The chaos of the day was finally quieting, but inside Amara Blake's office, the stillness was different, heavy, thoughtful, alive. She stood before the window, watching as the sun slipped behind the skyline, turning the clouds into streaks of crimson and silver. It was the same view she had looked at 1,000 times before, but tonight it felt earned. Every reflection in that glass was proof that dignity could outlast insult. Her phone buzzed softly on the desk. A reminder blinked on the screen. "Internal board follow-up, 7 p.m. She ignored it. For once, she did not want to talk about numbers, budgets, or stock reactions. She wanted to sit with the quiet, to feel the weight of what she had shifted. Then a knock came at the door. It was Rachel Harris again, her face calm but alert. "Mrs. Blake," she said carefully, "the media is waiting outside. They are asking for one more statement. They say the world wants to know what comes next." Amara turned slightly, her expression thoughtful. "The world wants closure, but change does not come with a closing statement." Rachel hesitated. "Still, it could help shape the narrative. They are calling you the woman who brought the sky down to earth." Amara's eyes narrowed slightly. "They should be calling me the woman who reminded them to look up." Rachel smiled faintly. "That is exactly why they want to hear from you again." Amara walked toward her desk, fingertips brushing lightly against the edge of the glass. "What I said this morning was not for them, it was for the people who have been told to stay seated their whole lives." Rachel lowered her eyes. Then what should I tell them? Tell them to listen to the silence, Amara said. That is where the lesson lives. Rachel nodded quietly, but she did not leave yet. There is one more thing, she said softly. The airline's competitor, Global Skyways, just announced a diversity partnership program clearly inspired by your reforms. They even quoted your words about dignity in their press release. Amara gave a small, humorless smile. Of course they did. Everyone wants progress as long as it comes with applause. Rachel hesitated. Do you want to respond? Amara shook her head. No, let them imitate. Even copies lift the world a little higher. The room fell silent again. The faint hum of the city filled the distance between them. Rachel studied her for a moment before saying, You know, I used to think strength was loud, but then I saw you sit there on that plane covered in orange juice, calm, unbroken, and I realized strength can whisper too. Amara looked at her, her voice soft but steady. Strength does not need volume, Rachel. It needs vision. Rachel nodded. I will make sure your message is heard the right way. When she left, Amara returned to the window. The last of the sunlight faded, replaced by the soft shimmer of city lights below. Her reflection appeared in the glass again, superimposed over the view half woman, half skyline. Her phone buzzed once more. This time it was a message from Maya Lynn, the young attendant from the flight. The text was simple. Mrs. Blake, I wanted to thank you. Today I reported another incident I witnessed months ago. I used your words, silence is how injustice survives. I think they finally listened. Ugh. Amara stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back slowly, I am proud of you. Keep speaking. The sky is listening now. She set the phone down and exhaled deeply. Through the glass, another plane ascended into the night, its blinking lights tracing a path through the dark like a pulse. Somewhere on that flight, someone was being treated better because of what she had done. That thought steadied her. Amara whispered to her reflection, Power means nothing if it cannot protect the next traveler. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly over the Pacific, a reminder that storms still existed somewhere beyond the horizon. But for now, in this one corner of the world, the sky was clear, and for the first time, it belonged to everyone. The next morning dawned soft and silver, the kind of light that felt like a reset. Clouds hung low over Los Angeles, but the air carried a quiet warmth, a calm after the storm that had changed everything. Amara Blake stood barefoot on the balcony of her hillside home, overlooking the waking city. A mug of black coffee steamed in her hand. Below her, the skyline shimmered with the glow of 1,000 new beginnings. The world was still talking articles, broadcasts, interviews, but she had not turned on a single screen. Today was not about listening to noise. It was about listening to silence. Behind her, Elias Blake stepped out, still in his robe, holding his own coffee. His voice was gentle. The world has not stopped saying your name. Amara smiled faintly, her eyes still on the horizon. Let them say it until they learn what it means. Elias joined her at the balcony railing. You know, Rachel said there are hundreds of letters waiting at headquarters. Some from employees, some from passengers. People are calling you the conscience of the skies. Amara turned her head slightly. Conscience is not a title. It is a duty, and duties do not rest. He looked at her with quiet pride. Even heroes need rest. I am not a hero, she said softly. I am a mirror. Heroes save people. Mirrors show them who they have become. The wind brushed through her hair, carrying the faint hum of the city below. Somewhere in that vast sprawl, planes were already lifting into the clouds. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine them differently, each flight carrying passengers who might feel a little more seen, a little more equal. Elias watched her for a long moment before speaking again. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had stayed silent on that flight? Amara exhaled slowly. I have, and it frightens me more than what did happen. She set her mug down and leaned on the railing. If I had stayed quiet, it would have told every person watching that silence is safer than dignity. It would have told that young attendant Maya that fear wins. And that boy in row 4 would have learned the wrong lesson. Elias nodded. Instead, you taught him what power looks like when it does not shout. Amara gave a faint smile. Power does not need to shout, Elias. It just needs to stand. The conversation paused as the first sunlight broke through the clouds, scattering gold across the hills. For a moment, the world looked suspended in amber perfect, still, waiting. Then Amara's phone buzzed on the table behind her. She turned to look but did not reach for it. Elias glanced at the screen. It is from Rachel. The United Nations confirmed your keynote. They titled the program Flight Path to Equality. Amara smiled softly. Poetic. She said you can decline if you want to. Amara shook her head slowly. No. This time, the message has to leave the ground. They gave me a stage. I will give them direction. Elias raised his cup slightly, as though to toast her. To altitude. She met his gaze, her voice calm but fierce. To accountability. They clinked their cups gently. For a long while, neither spoke. The world below seemed to move in slow motion, tiny cars threading through the streets, planes leaving faint white lines across the pale sky. Everything felt lighter, but not simple. The battle had shifted from outrage to legacy. Amara turned back toward the city, her silhouette framed by sunlight. You know, she said quietly, the world will eventually forget the flight number, the scandal, the noise, but they will remember how it felt when dignity refused to sit down. Elias nodded. And they will remember the woman who made them look up. Amara's eyes glimmered faintly in the morning light. Maybe, she said, but I would rather they remember themselves. Down below, a distant plane ascended through the clouds, catching the light just right. Its silver wings reflected the sun like a mirror, silent, unshakable, free. Amara watched it until it disappeared, then whispered into the quiet air, Keep climbing. The sky is wide enough for all of us. And for the first time since that day, her voice carried not the weight of defiance, but the calm certainty of someone who had already changed the altitude of the world. The day of the United Nations summit arrived beneath a cloudless New York sky. The streets around the glass-paneled building shimmered in the late morning light, filled with convoys, cameras, and quiet expectation. Flags from nearly every nation fluttered in the wind. Inside, the grand hall buzzed with an energy that felt bigger than politics. It felt like history waiting to be written. Amara Blake stood backstage, perfectly still. Her charcoal suit was tailored with surgical precision, her hair smooth, her presence unshakable. There were no pearls, no diamonds, no visible symbols of wealth, only the same faint orange stain at the edge of her blouse sleeve. She had chosen not to hide it. To her, it was no longer a mark of humiliation. It was a signature. Rachel Harris stood beside her, clipboard in hand, nerves visible beneath professionalism. They are ready for you, Mrs. Blake. Live audience of 2,000. Global broadcast to 136 countries. Every major outlet is streaming it. Amara nodded once. Then let us speak plainly. Rachel's voice softened. Do you want the teleprompter ready? Amara shook her head. No. Words that come from the heart should not be read. The stage director gestured to her. Mrs. Blake, 30 seconds. Amara took a slow breath and stepped forward. The double doors opened, flooding the corridor with light. She walked out onto the stage to the sound of applause, steady, respectful, growing louder as she crossed the platform. But she did not wave. She simply placed her hands on the podium and waited. Within seconds, the applause faded into silence. When she began to speak, her voice was low and deliberate, carrying through the hall like calm thunder. Ladies and gentlemen, I was not supposed to be here today. I was supposed to be another passenger told to sit quietly, another woman mistaken for someone who did not belong. But dignity has a strange way of surviving turbulence. The audience leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. Amara continued, her tone smooth and steady. I am not here to tell you about a flight. I am here to tell you about altitude, the height between who we pretend to be and who we actually are. Every system, every company, every nation lives in that space. And too often, prejudice keeps us flying low. A ripple of silence moved through the hall. People ask me why I stayed calm that day, she said. The truth is, calm is not weakness. It is control. It is the discipline to make the world look at itself before it looks away again. Anger burns fast. Dignity burns forever. Someone in the audience began to clap softly, but Amara lifted her hands slightly, not to stop them, but to steady the moment. Change does not begin when we shout. It begins when silence stops being comfortable. It begins when a bystander decides they have seen enough. When a leader refuses to protect injustice just because it hides behind policy. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The cameras captured her profile strong, composed, framed against the blue and gold backdrop of the United Nations emblem. "I am not asking the world to be perfect," she said. "I am asking it to stop pretending it already is. Fairness is not an aspiration, it is a responsibility. And equality is not charity, it is balance." The silence that followed was total. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to stop. Then Amara's voice softened, taking on something almost tender. "On that plane, I remembered something my mother once told me. She said, 'Never raise your voice until they have heard your silence.' I think they finally heard it." She looked out across the audience faces from every continent, every color, every creed, and her final words came like a promise. "Wherever you are, whatever seat you occupy in this world, know this: you belong there. And if anyone tells you otherwise, sit taller. Let them see what altitude looks like." Oh, for a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the hall erupted not with noise, but with the sound of standing applause, the kind that builds not from excitement, but from awe. Amara stepped back from the podium. Her eyes were calm, her face serene. Somewhere above the building, the faint sound of a plane passed through the sky, its engines steady, rising higher, and as she turned to leave the stage, her voice carried once more, quiet but enduring. "The sky does not judge who rises, it only records who dares to." That night, long after the applause faded and the headlines spread, the world remembered one thing, not the scandal, not the speech, but the stillness of a woman who had turned humiliation into horizon. And under the vast sky she reclaimed, humanity finally learned how to look up.